for them, I will say, is that the question of this wall, there needs to be clarification of where the president wants to go with this. Does he want an inch-by-inch wall through Texas, a lot of private property where ranchers are very concerned? Or can it be what the community wants is a combination of a physical barrier in some places, in urban areas, technology to support Border Patrol, and they bring back something that is lost in this conversation, the environmental things. We're looking at the president actually look at the Rio Grande River. They want to work with Mexico to clean up the river, to clear some of that carrizo cane, to really make it more feasible to do apprehensions when you're talking about protecting economic and national security. And that's where they want to make sure the message is not lost.
Leslie, when you talk about sort of coming off the ledge here, trying to reach some compromise on the shutdown, is there any sort of plan that Republicans could put forward that the president might back that might not necessarily give him the full funding of the wall, but allow everyone around to save face at this point?
Sure. The question is going to be what resources go to this physical barrier? Where could this be? Is there a compromise around the idea of more additional barrier in urban areas that really need to be secured better with the combination of all those other elements, right? That more judges, more detention facilities, things that are more conducive to what the current situation is. That's a really good place for Republicans to be. But the challenge, and I think the more urgent reality, is the president has a tremendous amount of support in getting this done right now. People like the idea on the Republican voter base that the president's strong here, and that's where it's going to get extremely difficult. The president has proven he is going to take this to the bitter end. So it's trying to find a way to thread that needle where the president can get some of that physical barrier and also be able to open the government back up.
Now, this is coming out with the president. Let's listen in and see what he has to say here.
Because it's a weak spot. They make it strong, but the laws have to be strong, and we need security. We need the kind of backup that you want. And they've asked, by the way, we have lists of things. What they need more than anything is the barrier, the wall, call it whatever you want. Whether it's steel or concrete, you don't care. We need a barrier. And they have done a fantastic job. Never so many apprehensions ever in our history. But, you know, it could be a lot easier. It could be a lot easier for you. And you could spread your people out to a lot different areas, which would also be very helpful.
Yeah, Mr. President, we have 55 miles of fencing in this sector. We started a job in 2006. We need to finish that job. We've got the personnel, we need the technology.
All right, the president at the border there getting a bit of a briefing here and continuing to maintain his stance that he wants to finish and complete that border wall there. Leslie, I'm struck by the juxtaposition, and you've talked about this before, about speaking to folks in the border towns there who say they just don't want to give up their property, they don't want to give up their land, they don't want to be part of this wall. And then the juxtaposition of his base out in the Midwest, the Rust Belt states that really want this wall. Within the Republican Party, that divide with some of those voters, how do you reach compromise? And especially on the issue of the shutdown, where there are Republicans who have to go back to their constituency and explain why they're not getting paid.
Right. Front and foremost on that, the part that everyone agrees with is border security. So the Republicans want to be the party, border security. We did something about this. We slowed that flow of illegal traffic across the U.S.-Mexico border. And mind you, we're not talking about all the other exposed kind of ports of entry where you have people overstaying visas.
I apologize to interrupt.
Please.
The president's actually taking questions in Mission, Texas. Let's listen in.
It's common sense. You know, you were at the last meeting where we saw people who, like, as you know, Reggie Singh's brother. Reggie, I got him to know a little. I got to know him today a little bit. This shouldn't be happening in our country. This shouldn't be happening. And what you see on the border, that's not as much of a problem as they come through the border and they go out throughout our nation. So you'll have crime in Iowa. You'll have crime in New Hampshire. You'll have crime in New York. You'll have crime in places, you don't associate it with the border, but it comes through the border. Tremendous amounts. And as hard as we work and as well as we're doing nationwide on crime, a lot of it's caused by people that come in through the southern border. So, if we had the barrier, it wouldn't happen. It wouldn't happen. They could have fewer people. They could put people other places instead of having everyone concentrated right here. And it's all common sense. And Nancy and Chuck know that. Look, they're not winning this argument. They're losing the argument badly. They know it. And it's not about an argument. It's not about politics for me. It's about doing the right thing. I mean, I could do a lot easier things. I could just forget this like everyone else did. This should have been done 30 years ago, and 20 years ago, and 10 years ago, and 5 years ago. I could have done like everyone else, just sort of say, hey, forget it. A lot of the crime in our country is caused by what's coming through here. These people do the most incredible job. And they're not given a full hand because they need the barriers. If they don't have the barriers, and you just said it better than anybody could say it. Where we have a good, strong barrier, you don't have problems. Now, the problem is they go to the barrier, that's it, but now they go around the barrier. So when you fill up the gaps, it's going to be a much different day.
Just to clarify, sir, are you closer to declaring an emergency?
We are. I would like to look at broader. I think we can do this quickly because this is common sense. And it's not expensive. We will save the cost of the wall every year, but much more than that. Much more than that. But I would like to do a much broader form of immigration, and we can do immigration reform. It'll take longer. It's been complex. It's been going on for 30, 35 years. They've been talking about immigration reform. But we have to, before we do that, we have to create a barrier. That we can do very quickly. Something could be done. We could do that, Phil. We could help the dreamers. We want to help the dreamers. I was ready to help the dreamers, and then we got a decision that the folks representing the dreamers very strongly, which is us also, if you want to know the truth, but they said, well, we don't have to do it anymore. So now it's before the Supreme Court. We'll see what happens. And if the Supreme Court rules against the President Obama decision, which he knew would not hold up, we will have a deal with the dreamers. We can do it early, but this has to be done soon so we get our folks paid in our country.
You said in the earlier event with the agents that you never, when you say Mexico's going to pay for the wall, you never expected that they would write you a check. But during your campaign,
I don't expect. When I say Mexico, when I say Mexico's going to pay for the wall, do you think they're going to write a check for $20 billion or $10 billion or $5 billion or 2 cents? No, they're paying for the wall in a great trade deal. You had the worst trade deal anywhere in the world in NAFTA. We lost thousands of businesses, millions of jobs, millions of jobs. You go up to New England, you go to Ohio, you go to Pennsylvania, you look at those factories that were wiped out. And now we have a great trade deal. And it will take in, and we will, look, billions and billions of dollars a year will be made now as opposed to NAFTA, which was a disaster. You know that. Everybody knows that.
Mr. President, now that you visit Rio Grande Valley, do you think any differently now that you've seen these agents?
Well, I think more impressive than anything are the agents themselves. Look at them. I mean, these people are incredible. We have, you know, you hear about them, and when you meet them, it's different. You meet these people. I mean, they're a great group of people. They happen to be very good looking. I have to say that. They're good looking people. They're smart, they're tough, they've got the whole package. And I want to tell you, they are impressive. And I've met a lot of them. We just left a big room loaded up with Border Patrol and ICE and law enforcement. These are incredible people. They're incredible people. And you know, there's something different when I meet them here as opposed to seeing you at the White House or seeing you in an office someplace, right? Yes, they do an incredible job.
Mr. President, given the fact
the local
officials that Senator Cohen mentioned here on the border, have you met with any of them who
We have. They
disagree with the law?
Not anyone that I met with, but most people want it, I think. And I guess there could be some pockets where they maybe disagree a little bit, but not very much. Yeah. About what? Well, I'm going to see how we do with going through Congress. Don't forget, national emergency is going through Congress because that already went through Congress. That's what it's there for. If you read it, it is so clear, it is so perfect. I'd rather not do it, not for any particular reason other than this should be easy to get approved through Congress. Because the same people that are holding it up have approved it many times before. Ted and John, I mean, these people approved it just a few years ago. And now all of a sudden they're not. The reason they're not is because of me, I hate to say. Because they know they're going to lose in 2020. They'll do anything they can to not lose. They want to win, but it's not going to happen. Go ahead, Phil.
Are you going to make any time during your visit today to see the detention facility where parents were
I don't know
separated
what they
from-
have planned. I would certainly do that, but I just don't know. I would do it. I would stop there if we could. You'd have to ask the Secret Service, but I would certainly. Hi, folks. Thank you. I would certainly stop there.
Mr. President,
I wouldn't mind. It's not a bad idea, actually. I wouldn't mind. You know, if you want to do that, I wouldn't mind.
Mr. President, given the fact that you are holding this position, the Democrats are not moving theirs.
Well, I think they are moving theirs. If you read one of your competitors today, they will tell you that the Democrats that are starting to say this is not an argument they can win are some of the very young, very smart Democrats that just got elected to Congress. And I don't know if you saw the same story that I did, but they're saying this is not an argument we're going to win. This is a common sense argument. Now, if for any reason we don't get this going and they're not going to act responsibly and they don't mind death and crime and all of the problems that they cause by not having a barrier, then you will see what happens with national emergency, which I can do very easily. And there's no question it holds up. And it was approved by Congress because the act itself was approved by Congress.
Some Republicans are also not really happy with this strategy.
I think the Republicans are very happy. I mean, I have two of the most respected senators right behind me. I will tell you, you always have a few that feel a little bit differently. But I think we're unified. We had a great meeting yesterday. We had 53 people or close to 53 people. And we used to have 51, and we had a couple that were on the difficult side. We have 53 great senators. I think there's great unity. There's a few that feel, well, maybe we could do it this way or that way. But basically, I think we have far more unity than the Democrats. I mean, you saw the votes.
How long do you think the shutdown will last out?
What?
Realistically, how long do you think the shutdown is not going to last?
I don't know. That I can't tell you. All I can tell you is that I feel very badly for people that have family members that have been killed that should have never happened. Okay, those are the people I'm thinking most about.
Mr. President, on the DACA bigger immigration deal, are you saying you would only consider a broader immigration agreement after?
No, I would do it simultaneously, but I'd like to see them move fast. The nice part about the wall or the barrier is I can have that worked out in 15 minutes. We can start construction. We're already building, but now we would be able to carry the construction through. We actually have a fantastic design that's going to be efficient and fast and really, really work well.
If we were to declare a national emergency in the next couple of days, how quickly could construction actually begin on the wall?
Well, I think very quickly. Now, perhaps if I read your newspaper, somebody will sue to stop it, but we would win that suit, I believe, very quickly.
Are you prepared for that suit? And what would the
I'm prepared for anything. I'm prepared for it. The lawyers tell me like 100%. That doesn't stop people from suing. You know, if you look at various things where we got sued, then we end up winning recently in the Supreme Court a couple of times. Go ahead.
Sir, if you're considering a broader immigration package, doesn't that lessen the idea that you would use a national emergency? Are you thinking less about a national
If
emergency?
they came to me with a package beyond the barrier, and if it was something that we all agreed with, that the senators agreed with, that everybody liked, it's common sense. Most of this is common sense. I'm all for it. You have some laws and some codes and some things having to do with immigration that are horrible. I don't care if you're liberal or conservative, they're horrible. And if they want to straighten things out and do something with catch and release, which, as you know, is one of the great disasters in immigration of all time, you catch them and then you release them. What kind of stuff is this? If they want to do something with that, it'd be all right, Phil.
Mr. President, back in Washington, there's some big news about Michael Cohen, who's agreed to testify before the House Democrats next month. What do you think of that? Are you worried about that?
And I'm not worried about it at all, no. Go ahead.
Mr. President, when that Ranger talked about his concerned about eminent domain, it struck me. Can you tell us how and why?
Well, it did strike me, and when I look at him and I look at the family and I see, but you know, eminent domain is one of those things, and he's actually in favor of it. He wants to do something about it. You know, when you talk about that, you're talking about the fact that he wants to do something about it. He wants to see a wall. There's an example of somebody that's affected from the standpoint of land, but he wants to see a wall. So we're going to get this straightened out, hopefully. Hopefully the Democrats are going to come to their senses. They're going to realize that they don't want people killed, they don't want crime, they want to end it, and that's going to happen. Go ahead. A caravan's forming right now in Honduras. It's supposed to be bigger than the other caravans. We will handle that as it comes up. If we had a wall, we wouldn't have any problems, but we don't. So We will handle it. Okay. Thank you all very much. Thank you. I'm very concerned about people that are being badly injured and killed and family members, and I'm looking, and you know what? A lot of the people that we're talking about in terms of pay, they agree with me. Many of the people that we're talking about, they agree with me. Thank you all very much.
Thanks, guys.
I can't do it because of this. I would have loved, well, yeah, but...
All right, the president just took questions from reporters as he's down there in Mission, Texas, along the border. He did say he doesn't know how long the government shutdown will last. And when asked about using a national emergency argument to get that money, he said that his argument does hold up. And I want to bring in our Leslie Sanchez, CBSN political contributor, who's joining us as well. Leslie, what do you make of what we've heard from the president?
You know, very interesting. I think the two big takeaways, the president is talking about, sure, we can look at the possibility of getting to other immigration reform if we have border security first. That is a very long-standing argument and debate within the Republican Party. Many feel that they go back to President Ronald Reagan, who granted amnesty to Central Americans, 3 million individuals, and then they never really came through with their promises for border security. And even the 1996 immigration reforms didn't do anything with meaningful respect to address the flow of people and drugs across the border. So there's been this kind of a bitter sense among Republicans that they've never seen a true border security plan executed in the way that a president promises. So you see him leading with that and kind of tossing out the idea of comprehensive reform. You present it to me now. It's consistent with the Republican argument, but what's different, Rena, is it may actually happen. This may actually be
what makes you so confident, Leslie?
Because there was never an appetite for any of those comprehensive reforms. You did not have, you'd have to go back to President George W. Bush pre-9/11 before you had conversations about having anything done for the Dreamers. There were conversations that were happening in early 2000, you know, before anybody ever thought that this was going to escalate to such a bigger issue. These are long-standing challenges. And for the president to be on the border talking about, let's find a pathway for Dreamers, let's look at some larger issues, I don't think it would be pathway to citizenship, but perhaps legalization, more legalization of some of the millions of individuals who are here with certain penalties. These were conversations that Senator John McCain, the late McCain, was trying to have back in the 90s and in the early 2000s, and they never went anywhere within the Republican Party because of the Freedom Caucus and some of the conservatives to the right. For the reasons he's talking about today, they didn't feel that the Republican would stand strong on border security. So now we're seeing a new approach. It's much more unorthodox. Every time the president is asked about those 800,000 plus federal workers, he brings it back to crime and individuals that have been harmed by undocumented individuals. I'm not saying that's a fair argument. In fact, I think it's completely erroneous the way he presents it. But this is the strategy. Talk about border security, get them on that. Democrats don't deliver. Democrats want open borders, full amnesty. It's not a reasonable or fair approach. Republicans are coming to the table, and he's going to stick with this, and he's putting pressure on Republicans that this message will work and I will deliver. And that's what's different about this new environment we have on the border today.
Our Leslie Sanchez coming to us from our Washington bureau. Leslie, thank you very much.
Certainly.
Well, we are also following some other breaking news. We've learned that Michael Cohen, the president's former personal attorney, will testify publicly on Capitol Hill next month. He'll appear before the House Oversight Committee. Cohen pleaded guilty to lying to Congress last year. He has implicated that the president was in a scheme to pay hush money to two women who have claimed affairs with the president. He was sentenced to 3 years in prison last month on multiple charges. CBS News Washington correspondent Paula Reed is in our Washington bureau and joins us now. So we just heard the president say that he's not worried. He's not worried about Cohen testifying. Should he be, Paula?
Well, yes, Rena, I think any time